The storm had come out of nowhere. 1 minute, we were flying through the sky, the usual hum of the helicopter's blades, the only sound breaking the silence. The next, the winds howled like angry spirits, and the world tilted violently. Brace yourselves. Captain Jensen yelled over the roar of the storm. His voice cracked with fear, but there was nothing we could do. The chopper was spiraling, the instruments flashing warning signals, the rotor spinning wildly, and then with a sickening lurch, everything went black. When I came to, it was eerily quiet. The storm had passed, leaving the world feeling still, as though the very earth itself held its breath. I opened my eyes to find myself sprawled across the cold, hard ground, groaning as I tried to sit up. The wreckage of the helicopter lay scattered around me like a shattered toy, its twisted metal and broken pieces evidence of the violent crash. Anyone alive? I croaked, my voice hoarse. Groans came from all around me. The rest of the crew were coming to, some of them moaning in pain, others still unconscious. The world around us was dark, the forest pressing in close, its trees so thick that they seemed to swallow the light. There was no sign of the storm now, but the air was heavy with something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I staggered to my feet, the ground uneven beneath me. Jensen, I shouted, looking for the captain. His voice was the one I trusted most, even in the chaos. When I spotted him a few feet away, crawling out from under a twisted piece of wreckage, I felt a small wave of relief. He was alive. Good to see you're not dead yet, Reyes, he muttered, looking me over quickly. His voice was still gruff, but there was a sharp edge to it now, a fear I hadn't heard before. Same here. What the hell happened? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. I needed answers, but I could already tell that none of us were going to get any answers that made sense. Storm hit us hard. Lost control. Couldn't avoid the trees, he said, shaking his head. We're deep in the Black Hollow forest, and we're stuck. I looked around at the others, Jacob, the mechanic, Claire, the medic, and the rest of the crew. Each of them was in varying state of injury or panic. The helicopter was beyond repair, and we had no radio signal. Communication with the outside world was dead. Any ideas on how to get out of here? Jacob asked, looking up at Jensen. His face was pale, but his eyes were hard with resolve. We'll have to make it on foot, Jensen replied. His voice clipped. The storm's knocked out all the comms. We can't wait for rescue. We'll head north. Should be a town there, a logging station. Black Hollow. And with that, we started to move, the heavy weight of uncertainty hanging over us. The trees seemed to stretch endlessly, as if the forest was closing in, watching, waiting. The deeper we went into the woods, the more the forest seemed to shift. It wasn't just a disorienting maze of trunks and branches that made it impossible to get a sense of direction. There was something off, something wrong with the way the shadows twisted. The trees creaked and groaned, their roots clawing at the earth like the hands of the damned. And everywhere, there were whispers, soft, unintelligible voices that seemed to echo from the very air around us. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the more I listened, the more I realized the whispers weren't just carried by the breeze. They were deliberate and low, like they were speaking to us. None of us spoke much in those first hours of walking. We were too tired, too afraid of what might be following us through the woods. It wasn't long before the hunger began to set in. The storm had ruined our supplies, and there was no food to be found. Desperation crept into our bones, and that's when we began to hunt. But nothing we found was normal. Animals had always been plentiful in Black Hollow, but now, the forest seemed to provide only grotesque, twisted things. The creatures we came across were strange, half-human, with bodies warped in unnatural ways. Some had human faces, but their limbs were long and spindly, their skin mottled and sickly. Others had eyes that glowed in the dark, piercing to the trees like headlights, and their mouths stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. At first, we tried to avoid them, but hunger does strange things to a person, and soon we were hunting the creatures just to survive. Every time we killed one, though, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. It was as if the forest itself was angry with us. But we couldn't stop. We were starving. By the third day, I knew something was terribly wrong. The hallucinations started. At first, they were subtle, a face in the shadows, a figure moving just beyond my vision. But then it became more vivid. I would hear my name called in the distance, only to find no one there when I turned around. Jensen would sometimes speak, but his voice didn't match his expression, his words trailing off into incomprehensible murmurs. It wasn't long before we realized that the forest was messing with our minds. The whispers weren't just in our ears anymore. They were inside our heads, crawling beneath our skin. We couldn't trust what we saw, what we heard, or even what we felt. On the fourth day, Jensen and I made the decision to venture deeper into the forest. The others had started to go mad. Claire had stopped speaking. Jacob had started attacking the others in fits of rage, and we couldn't leave them behind. But something told us we had to find the source of the forest's power, if it even had one, and end this nightmare. We came across an abandoned sawmill, rusted and decaying deep in the heart of the woods. Inside, we found a mirror, a large, old-fashioned thing, cracked down the center, but still intact. When I looked into it, I didn't see myself. I saw another version of Black Hollow, a twisted, decayed version where everything was wrong. The trees were withered, the sky was black, and there was no life, no hope. But worst of all was the feeling I got, the absolute certainty that something dark, something ancient, was waiting in that mirror world. We knew then that the forest wasn't just a place. It was a doorway to something far worse, something that wanted us to stay. We had to escape, and somehow we did. We found our way back to the town, but it wasn't the same. Black Hollow was deserted. The houses were empty. The streets eerily silent. There were no people, no signs of life at all. Only the whispers still following us. We didn't know what happened to the town or to the people, but we knew one thing for certain. The forest had claimed them, and it wanted us too. The whispers haven't stopped since. They're inside my head now, whispering, beckoning me back to the forest. I don't know how much longer I can fight it. The price for survival was too high. But I fear it's only just begun. I didn't believe in ghosts. Not until the night I stepped into the forgotten remnants of Hollow Creek. You see, I wasn't one for supernatural, the kind of person who rolled their eyes at campfire stories and dismissed local legends. But that all changed on a stormy Friday the 13th, when curiosity led me to the cursed tracks of Hollow Creek. The station had been abandoned for years, its once bustling platforms now swallowed by ivy and rot. Hollow Creek itself was a shadow of the town it had been, plagued by the eerie presence of something darker, something unseen, but always felt. I'd heard the stories, of course. The tragic tale of the Silver Streak, the train that met its untimely end 37 years ago. It was said that the station, that very spot, had become the heart of a ghostly riddle, its spirits restless and eternal. People who visited often came back, but not whole. They were haunted. Their minds cracked by the relentless echoes of disaster that had claimed 300 lives in a single moment of careless ambition. The story, as it was told, was simple. On the fateful night of October 13th, 1987, the Silver Streak, a train designed to be the pride of the railroad, left Hollow Creek at precisely 8 p.m. Alex Thornton, a seasoned conductor who had a reputation for cutting corners and a hunger for recognition, had ignored protocol. He decided to take a detour, just a small one, away from the main tracks, a shortcut he'd been fantasizing about for months, a way to make the ride more exciting, more scenic, more memorable. The storm had been picking up by the time the train reached the treacherous curve. The tracks weren't meant for such a detour, but ambition clouded judgment, and Alex pressed on. As the train veered into the curve, the wheels screeched, the ground shook, and the Silver Streak was torn from its path. It plunged down the ravine, its passengers screaming as the earth swallowed them whole. The aftermath was chaos. The survivors told tales of smoke, of twisted metal, of how the train seemed to vanish into the ravine, only for the sound of the crash to echo back every few months, louder, as if reliving catastrophe over and over again. The souls of the lost passengers were said to haunt Hollow Creek, forever replaying their final moments. I'd heard all before, stories that were as much a part of the town as the rusted rail lines themselves. But that night when I arrived with my friends, I could feel something in the air. There was a thick tension, a weight that pressed against my chest, as if the town itself were holding its breath. It was a strange thing, but I dismissed it as I had dismissed everything else. Ghosts? I wasn't buying it. I had a different goal. I wanted to investigate to get to the heart of this myth and, if I'm being honest, become a part of it. I was tired of being nobody, of living a life in the shadow of my own failures. I thought that solving the mystery of Hollow Creek would change something for me. It wasn't long before we arrived at the station. The old platform stood in eerie silence, the occasional gust of wind carrying the scent of decay. The lights flickered above, casting long, stretching shadows that seemed to shift in ways that didn't make sense. The building itself looked like it could collapse at any moment, yet it held on stubbornly, as if tied to something older than time itself. There were 4 of us in total. My friend Nate, a self-proclaimed skeptic; Lisa, a history buff who'd been fascinated by the story of the Silver Streak; Sarah, always the quiet one; and me, the one who thought he could uncover it all. We ventured toward the tracks, daring each other to walk where the train had once sped, the fatal turn just ahead. A sense of foreboding washed over us, but we pressed on, determined to unearth something, anything, about the station's dark past. And then, just as we crossed the tracks, it happened. A low whistle echoed in the distance, faint at first but growing louder. It sounded like a train, and yet there was no train in sight. We froze, all of us looking toward the source of the sound. The station, which had been silent moments before, seemed to hum with energy. The wind picked up, whipping through the station, and the tracks before us began to vibrate as if the Silver Streak were approaching. And then we saw it, the train. It wasn't like a normal train. It was a shadow, a grotesque, twisted version of the Silver Streak. Its silver body was tarnished and cracked, oozing dark, oily substance. The sound of screeching metal filled the air as it slid along the tracks, moving faster than any train should be able to. It was headed straight toward us, yet there was no way for it to be there. We were paralyzed, unable to move as the train came closer, its whistle deafening. The closer it came, the clearer we saw the faces of those on board. Pale, hollow-eyed passengers who stared directly at us. Their faces were twisted with terror, frozen in time. Before I could comprehend what was happening, the train passed through us, its chill air sweeping through our bodies. But the train itself, it wasn't real. It was then that the time loop began. We found ourselves back at the platform. The same whispers of the wind, the same eerie silence. But something was different. The sense of déjà vu was overwhelming. It wasn't just the station that had changed. We had, too. The faces of the passengers, those ghostly passengers, were now in front of us, watching from the shadows. I tried to speak, but my voice didn't come out. I could see my friends, but they were different, too. It was as if we were stuck, caught in the same moment, reliving that night over and over again. A voice whispered to me. It wasn't the voice of a person. It was the voice of the station itself, the voice of the ghost train. It spoke of ambition, the unchecked drive for greatness that had led to the Silver Streak's derailment. The more I tried to escape, the more I found myself back at the tracks, the train's whistle echoing in my ears. Every time, the crash would happen, and I would be forced to witness it once more. I realized then that there was no way out, not unless I gave up my ambition, the very ambition that had brought me here. I had wanted fame, to solve the mystery, to become someone people would remember. But the cost of that ambition was this: trapped forever in the cycle of the crash. One by one, my friends began to disappear, their minds broken by the constant reliving of the wreck. But I held on to my hope, stubborn as ever. And then, with the next crash, I finally understood. I had to let go. I had to sacrifice that piece of me, the part that wanted more, that needed recognition. With a deep breath, I let go of my ambition. And just like that, the loop broke. The station was silent again. The train, the faces, the whispers, they were all gone. I was standing alone, the wreckage of Hollow Creek behind me, with only the memory of my ambition left to haunt me. I left Hollow Creek that night, but I will never forget the The silver streak was more than just a tragedy. It was a warning, a reminder that unchecked ambition doesn't just cost you everything. It can trap you in a cycle you can never escape. And I will never forget the way the ghost train looked as it passed through me. The faces of the passengers, their hollow eyes staring, forever stuck in the past.